Hey students, Dr. Franklin here. Just wanted to provide you with a really quick tutorial on how to calculate a one-way ANOVA. Just to recap, a one-way ANOVA is a procedure that determines the proportion of variability attributed to each of several components. It is one of the most useful and adaptable statistical techniques available. The one-way ANOVA compares the means of two or more groups of subjects that vary on a single independent variable, thus the one-way designation. When we have three groups, we could use a t-test to determine differences between groups, but we would have to conduct three t-tests, group one compared to group one compared to group three, and group two compared to group three. When we conduct multiple t-tests, we inflate the type 1 error rate and increase our chance of drawing an inappropriate conclusion. So an ANOVA, an analysis of variance, compensates for these multiple comparisons and gives us a single answer that tells us if any of the groups is different from any of the other groups. So in this example, I'm going to use this data set to calculate a one-way ANOVA for marital status and fear of missing out. All right. I'm going to go to variable view right now just so that we can make sure that our variables are set up appropriately and to orient you all to this data set a bit. So in the name column, we see the names of variables listed as well as the items listed for specific scales. And in regard to what we'll be looking at with this particular example, we're focused on fear of missing out. And we have fear of missing out item one, fear of missing out item two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10. All right. So it's very likely that researchers utilize the survey to get information from people about their experiences of fear of missing out, had them complete responses on particular survey items, and then calculated a fear of missing out total score by averaging those items or coming up with a total score that has some kind of meaning. All right. If we scroll down, we will see that fear of missing out total is listed here. So we know that in column 172, when we go back to our data set, that's where we will find that particular variable. Okay. And if you are interested in understanding a bit about what fear of missing out is getting at, you could always click on the label, which will lay out the instructions that are given to research participants when they're getting ready to fill out the survey. It will give you like that content, which very much, I've looked at this before. It explains that fear of missing out deals with worries about your friends having more fun than you and concerns about missing out on special experiences. So that's what these items are ultimately getting at. All right, so fear of missing out total will be our dependent variable. And in terms of our independent variable, we are going to be looking at marital status. So this is marital status recoded. And if we go to value labels, I just simply clicked on value labels as it related to what was in row 7. You see that 1 is single dating, 2 is married, committed relationship, 3 is separated, etc. Okay. And then if you wanted to get details in regard to what that specific label is getting at, or rather, if you wanted to get some information about what participants actually responded to, you can click on the label, and that's where you would get that information. Now, I'm concerned because scale of measurement needs to be set up properly for variables. You see here that's this particular variable is listed as scale. It should not be listed as scale. It should be listed as nominal. So we are going to switch it to nominal because it is a categorical variable. It's not a scale variable. With the scale variable, you can add, multiply, subtract, divide, do all of those things. If we did that with these particular responses, it wouldn't tell us any meaningful information. If we calculated an average for this particular variable, it would tell us nothing meaningful because these numerics are simply meant to distinguish one type of relationship status from another. Okay. So we've done what we need to do here in variable view. We've double checked that everything is everything, so to speak. So now we're going to go back to data view and we're going to run this one-way ANOVA. So we do that by clicking analyze, and then we scroll down to compare means, and then we select one-way ANOVA. Okay, that's simple. Now, because I've been working in this excuse me, SPSS data set before. Things are already set up, but I'm going to reset things so that we can just do them from scratch. Okay. Now, here is our independent variable. It's an independent variable that has different levels. Okay. So it's a one-way ANOVA, one independent variable with various levels, all right? And that's the reason why we're using a one-way ANOVA as opposed to a two-sample t-test. If we were just looking at two different types of relationship statuses, then we could just go with a two-sample t-test. But we have two or more groups, so we're going with a one-way ANOVA, and we have to make sure our categorical variable is placed in the factor section. So I just did that there by way of using the arrow, scroll down. Remember, in column 172 in data view, we find fear of missing out total. And we're just going to scroll down in our variable line up here, fear of missing out total. We're going to move that over to the dependent variable section. Now, for your particular SPSS assignment, you're going to move fear of missing out total to the dependent variable, just as I've done. And in the factor section, what you're going to do is move over academic status. So that's going to be the independent variable that I'm having you all explore. Is there a significant difference in fear of missing out across academic classification, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, all of that? You will do that. Okay. Here, I'm doing the marital status. Okay. After you do that, you will go over to options and select descriptive statistics. That will tell you some meaningful information in regard to the mean scores for fear of missing out across different relationship statuses. You can also select mean plots. Okay, there's a few other things that you can select here that test assumptions. Given that this is a pre-existing data set, I'm not going to test assumptions there. So you select options. And then for post hoc test, I want you to be careful to select Tukey. So as the video lecture indicates, Tukey tests are typically the tests that researchers use to determine where the significant difference lies within the one-way ANOVA that's being calculated. Okay, you select Tukey, and then you click continue, and then we've already been to options, and we can leave estimate effect size for overall test excuse me, checked if you want to. I don't think it's absolutely necessary for the sake of this rudimentary tutorial as it relates to calculating the one-way ANOVA. You click OK, and voila, like you have calculated a one-way ANOVA. Now I have a warning up at the top. You want to pay attention to that. It says post hoc tests are not performed for fear of missing out total because at least one group has fewer than two cases. So it's typically recommended that your groups have equivalent numbers to ensure the strength of the test. Okay, I'm running this because it's just for example purposes, and I wanted to really highlight how a one-way ANOVA involves multiple groups. But as you can see, based on the information that is provided in this descriptive tables, we have 541 individuals in this particular research study that were single dating. We have 31 that are married, committed relationship, and then the other groups, there's virtually no one existing. So just for future note, okay, moving forward, when you think about capstone projects and research, you don't want to calculate a one-way ANOVA where there's these extremes existing across these different groups, okay? This is practically nothing. So in this particular case, you'd probably be more suited to go with the two-sample t-test and just zero in on these two relationship statuses. You see here that mean scores or average scores are listed. And then we have our standard deviation scores that are listed. So standardized scores are scores that a particular score can be converted to. And think of standard deviation units as equaling a certain numeric as it relates to variation within a particular variable. Okay, so one standard deviation could equate to a difference of 2 or 3 units. One standard deviation could equate to a difference of 5 or 6 units, depending on what you were looking at. Okay, standard deviation units equate to raw score units. Let's just backtrack a little bit since I'm talking about standard deviation. Standard deviation is the average distance that a score is away from the mean. Okay, that's what a standard deviation is. How do we get there? We get there by subtracting the mean from every individual score, squaring that deviation score, that difference score, adding those squared scores up to get the sum of square scores. All right. And when we divide the sum of square score by the degree of freedom or the amount of variability that you would expect in a sample, um, you end up with a variance score, which is a mean square score. And if you divide your between groups mean square score by your within group mean square score, you end up with an F that gives you a ratio of it gives you a ratio of explained variance to unexplained variance. Okay, so components such as the standard deviation, right, really serve as foundational building blocks for understanding more complex statistics. We see the concepts showing up here just in different ways. So it may be helpful to kind of think of the F ratio as being sort of like a standard deviation unit that looks at significant differences across the groups. Column that in particular that you will be interested in is the significant column here. Is it below 0.05? If it's below 0.05, you know that you have a significance across these groups. Okay, if it's higher than 0.05, like what we see here, we know that there is not a significant difference found somewhere between these groups. All right, so we have non-significant results, and you'll rely on the resources I provided in the classroom if you end up getting non-significant results as it relates to your assignment to articulate that in written form. All right, we got mean plots that are listed here. And mean plots are essentially telling us information that our non-significant results told us, right? There is no significant difference across across these groups, right? When we go down here, we note that there's not any significant differences across these groups, right? Look at the fear of missing out total scores. They seem pretty comparable across four groups. Now we do have this large jump to the widowed group, right? Have a large jump in terms of that fear of missing out score. Let's go back up, okay? Again, one individual, the score was a 4. Um, so um, So the ANOVA is smart enough to know that there weren't many people in that group. It didn't even want to calculate a post hoc test because there weren't enough people in that group. And even though this visually looks like it's a huge difference, it's something to speak about, ultimately, because the group numbers were so low, you definitely would not speak about that. Again, you're probably better off calculating a two sample t-test across individuals that are single, individuals that are married, and even if you did that, you're not going to find a significant difference. Okay, you're likely not going to find that difference because the same result that you get here is going to show up in the two sample t-test. If we scroll up and we look at the mean score scholars, check this out. Fear missing out scores for individuals that are single dating 2.25, married committed in a relationship 2.17. So we see that there's not really a difference there, okay, in terms of like score. All right. So that's another way of kind of thinking through the one way ANOVA. How do I calculate this? So what could this potentially mean in terms of your capstone project? Maybe you have some ideas about how groups may be significantly different as it relates to online racism or fear of missing out or social media usage or whatever the case may be. You rely on the research literature to see what it's saying about your question. All right. If your question hasn't been answered and you have a valid question as it relates to differences across the groups, then the one way ANOVA may be a tool that you can use to answer your question and ultimately complete your capstone research project. So I hope that this was helpful. Reach out to me if you have questions. Again, a great, just a brief overview. There are a few things that I wasn't able to cover, but I think that this gives you enough orientation and introduction to the statistic to be able to calculate it and to speak to what you're actually looking at. Take care.